everyone, welcome to Church History Insights and Questions. My name is David Eaton. We're going to look at the Latter-day Saint movement offshoots, things that branch off from the church that Joseph Smith started back in 1830. We're going to look at that today, and I'm going to start with that question really. What do we call those offshoots? Branches off, divergent paths. What are some of the terminology that is acceptable and that we can use without upsetting people? Schisms is one that is used a lot. I'm not terribly happy with the term because it's slightly pejorative, and I think I like the one that Stephen Shields uses a lot. He's one of the historians who's looked at the Latter-day Saint movement divergent paths, probably more than most people have. And he uses expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement. I quite like that. So we're going to look at that today. Is it split-offs? Is it a fracturing? Is it offshoots? Are they emergences of independent sects? What is the right terminology? I actually don't have the answer for that question, but as I say, I quite like Stephen Shields' expressions or different expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement. So let's get into that. We're going to start with Joseph Smith, because that's where it all started. 1830. What was the name of the church that was organized in 1830? Well, it was Church of Christ. And it stayed Church of Christ for a little bit, but then it got changed to Church of Jesus Christ. No, just Church of Jesus Christ. Then it got changed to Church of God. And it wasn't until 1834 that it became Church of Latter-day Saints. And you'll notice that something was left out of that title. Yes, Jesus Christ left out. Church of Latter-day Saints. And this was, according to David Whitmer, under the influence of Sidney Rigdon. It wasn't until 1838, or just going back to the Church of Latter-day Saints, you can see on the right there, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. And it wasn't until 1838, and by revelation through Doctrine and Covenants, section 115, verse 3, that Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints came into being. And then it wasn't until 1851, quite a bit later, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with the corporate initial article "the," and the hyphenated Latter-day, which is a British hyphenization or hyphenation of Latter-day. That didn't come in until 1851. Let's look now then at the different expressions, splinter groups, branch-offs, during Joseph Smith's lifetime. We start with Northrop Suite. He has the distinction of being the first person who is also mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 33, to have a different expression of the Latter-day Saint movement. And of course, at that time, it wasn't called the Latter-day Saint movement. At that time, it was simply called the Church of Christ. And when he broke off with Wickham Clark in 1831, they called it the Pure Church of Christ. There's a quote from Brigham Young, and he says, quote, "Two of the earliest Mormon dissenters were Wickham Clark and Northrop Suite. Not much is known about the two men other than they and four others seceded from the church. and said that they could carry the whole world with them by preaching Mormon principles. Clark believed he had received a revelation that he was to be the prophet, that he was the true revelator, and organized the pure Church of Christ, close quote. And Wikipedia tells us that they had a few meetings and soon disbanded. I was unable to find any pictures of the gentleman Northrop Sweet and Wickham Clark. In 1832, so now 2 years after the start of the church in 1830 with Joseph Smith, there is an independent church. Now, I'm not quite sure whether it was called the Independent Church, but wherever you see it, it's just referred to as Independent Church. And apart from the date of the establishment of that, 1832, and the surname of its founder, Houghton, very little is known about this. The D's, incidentally, at the branch off, at the end of the branch off, shown there, the D stands for defunct. In other words, the church is, as far as everybody knows, is no longer extant. If it was extant, it would be an E, a green E, not a red D. 1836 then is Ezra Booth. He's also leaving and starting a Church of Christ. He authored 9 letters renouncing the church. This was in the Ohio something or other, Messenger it might have been. And he caused a big stir, a big problem for Joseph Smith, because he had totally lost faith in Joseph Smith and was very critical. And he wrote these 9 letters, and they were published in an Ohio newspaper. And it caused a lot of difficulties. That's 1836. We're going to move forward to 1837 and another Church of Christ. This is Warren Parish, or sometimes referred to as Church of Christ Parishite. I'm not sure who actually ever refers to it. They often use these ites, and I'm not sure who actually started that. And I don't suppose they called themselves that at all. But that's what's kind of been handed down in history. He was appointed clerk of the Kirtland Safety Society in 1836, and later appointed in place of Joseph Smith as officer of that said society in July 1837. He was accused of embezzlement and counterfeiting. He was excommunicated in December 1837. He believed that Joseph Smith was a fallen prophet. He rejected the Book of Mormon and parts of the Bible. 1837 is when he split. 1839, know absolutely nothing about this Church of Christ. Again, it was called. The name of the gentleman was thought to be William Chubby, and it was established with a special mission of ministering to African Americans. It's likely that that was not his actual name, but we don't know. 1839, Isaac Russell, Alston Church was, he branched off and created the Alston Church, or set up the church. He was born near Alston, which is in Cumberland in England. He taught that the Latter-day Saints should remain in Missouri and not emigrate to Illinois. Russell wrote letters to those he had converted in Alston, England. He had gone back on a mission to Alston, and he had converted a lot of people, secretly telling them of his new beliefs and plans, trying to persuade them to join him. However, the Alston, England church members were visited by Apostle Willard Richards, who convinced them of Russell's apostasy, and they remained faithful to the main body of the church. And then we come to 1840, George Hinkle, and his church was called Church of Jesus Christ, the Bride, the Lamb's Wife. And his history is that while he was assisting in negotiation of truce between state militia and Latter-day Saints at Far West, Missouri, Hinkle surrendered church leaders to General Samuel D. Lucas. He was excommunicated in 1839 at Quincy, Illinois. He taught that Smith was not a prophet and that the Book of Mormon was not scripture. And then we come to 1844. This gentleman might be better known to us, William Law, because he was one of Joseph Smith's counselors in the first presidency. 1844 obviously now is in Nauvoo. William Law was very opposed to plural marriage, and he published with a number of other people, including his brother Wilson Law, published the Nauvoo Expositor. As a consequence of the publication, and it was only published one edition, the Nauvoo Expositor, because of that, charges were levied against Joseph Smith over the destruction of this periodical, and that led to his assassination. And I hope you'll forgive the blood which is dripping at the bottom there, but that brings us to the 1844 murder of Joseph and Hiram Smith. And what happens then? It's often referred to as the succession crisis, and it's a major turning point in the Latter-day Saint movement, and we're going to look at kind of what happens there. And just bringing up one or two references and sources here. Stephen L. Shields is, I think I probably mentioned him, he's the one who likes to refer to any kind of a branch or off or a division away from what was originally started with Joseph Smith. He likes to refer to it as a different expression of the Latter-day Saint movement. And I really like that kind of more neutral term. And he has done a huge amount of research over something like 40 plus years. He's started publishing his Divergent Paths of the Restoration. I think it was back in 2005, and it was the latest edition is 2022, I think. And why are we talking about all of these different expressions? Well, one of the reasons is because there are so many of them. Now, how many are there of them? Well, estimates do vary. Some people go for 100, some people go for 400, 500. But Stephen Shields, who's probably done more research in this area than anywhere else, he catalogues over 600 different groups, churches, organizations, movements that have diverged from the original path of the restoration through the prophet Joseph Smith. Somebody else who has spent a lot of time researching is John Hamer. He's pictured there next to the words succession crisis. John is a member of the Community of Christ, as actually also is Stephen Shields, and he has written extensively on this subject, and his book Scattering of the Saints, Schism Within Mormonism is also a classic to look at when you're looking at this particular subject. And the chap at the far right is Rick Bennett. He hosts the podcast Gospel Tangents, and I have borrowed some of the information that he provided because he interviewed John Hamer, and they had a lengthy discussion about this whole subject. And you can pick that up at Gospel Tangents with Rick Bennett. Again, this is actually a slide that I lifted from Gospel Tangents and John Hamer. It's from John Hamer's presentation. And he first looks at the possible alternatives or what was going to happen. So on the 27th of June 1844, as we've looked at, Joseph and Hiram Smith are murdered. That plunges the church into a period of great uncertainty. Who is going to follow? Because many people thought that had Joseph Smith been killed at any time, that Hiram Smith would take over. It was less certain who would take over following the death of both of the brothers. But here are some of the likely runners, if you'll excuse the term. Sidney Rigdon being at the top left, an obvious choice because he was a member of the First Presidency. He was a member of the Council of 50. Going along the top, William Smith, he really, with the death of his two brothers, becomes the head of the Smith family, and at that time he was also a member of the Council of the 12, also a member of the Council of the 50. William Marks, he was the president of the High Council. You could say he was like the stake president in Nauvoo. And he was also a member of the Council of 50. He was, incidentally, Emma Smith's recommendation. She was very keen for him to become the next president of the church. Lyman White, who was an apostle, Council of the 12 and Council of the 50. Brigham Young, obviously at the top right there, who was the president at that time of the 12 and a member of the Council of the 50. And then if we go under Brigham, we've got Alpheus Cutler, a slightly less known but reasonably well-known name, who was a Council of 50 member and also a Council of 7. That's like the 7 presidents of the 70. And David Whitmer, who is very well known, obviously, because he was one of the 3 witnesses and a former president in Missouri. And also he was an acclaimed designated successor, simply because Joseph Smith had ordained him to be the president of the church in Missouri. There's some debate about whether that meant he was to be president of the church overall or merely president of the church in Missouri. And then James Strang, who's a very interesting far outside, unlikely runner in many respects. Why? Well, because he didn't join the church until February 1844. So he'd only been in the church for 5 months, by the time that the succession situation became very clear. And he comes onto the scene with a letter which he claims is from Joseph Smith appointing him as the successor president to the church. And then next to him is a picture which is a bit misleading because it shows Joseph Smith III, but at that, much later in his life. And at the time that we're talking about, 1844, Joseph Smith III was 11 years old. And one of William Smith's claims was that Joseph Smith III would and should be the next successor, and that he, William Smith, would be a sort of pro tem president type guardian until Joseph Smith Joseph Smith III, that is, had come of age. So we're now in August, as you probably know. When Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith were killed, most of the quorum of the 12 apostles were traveling in the east of the United States on assignment, proclaiming Joseph Smith as a credible presidential candidate to be the next president of the United States. And so they were on the hustings canvassing for Joseph Smith when he was killed. And so the news of his death took a while to trickle through to them. And it wasn't actually until the 6th of August that Brigham Young returned to Nauvoo.
2 days later, on the Thursday, the 8th of August, Brigham Young and Sidney Rigdon were in discussions, and Sidney Rigdon held a prayer meeting in the morning at which he put forward his case for being the successor to Joseph Smith. Brigham Young, who wasn't aware of that meeting, actually nevertheless saw people gathering, and he decided to attend it, and he then got up after Sidney Rigdon, and he announced that there would be another meeting in the afternoon. And it was in that meeting in the afternoon that Brigham Young put forward his case for the 12, and he, as the president of the 12, to look after the church or lead the church in what they subsequently came to be known as an interregnum for 3 years. And it also in that meeting that some of the people who attended it wrote at that time that they felt that the mantle from Joseph Smith had passed over to Brigham Young, and it was clear, and also people wrote a lot later, much more sort of elaborately about that, how his voice was exactly the same and how he even looked the same as Joseph Smith.
The majority of the members of the church voted to follow Brigham Young and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and over the next 3 years they began to plan to leave Nauvoo and go west into the Rocky Mountains. They eventually settled there in 1847 and start establishing the Salt Lake Valley as the new home for the what might be referred to as the Brighamite part of the church. Let's go back then to 1844. Let's look at James Strang a little bit. He was baptized, as I said, in February 1844. He claimed a letter from Joseph Smith had appointed him as successor. He presided in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Strangite, from 1844 to 1856. It was Wisconsin-based. At its height, it had some 12,000 members. When Strang was killed in 1856, most at that time pledged their support to Joseph Smith III. We'll look at him in just a bit more detail a bit further on. There's a big green E next to the picture of James Strang, and that indicates that the organization is still extant as far as we are aware. And their website says that they have 130 members, and that was accessed in July of 2025. Underneath then is Sidney Rigdon. We've already talked a little bit about him. He became the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Children of Zion, and that church continued up into the 1880s. As far as it's possible to tell, it is defunct at this point. 1845, Lyman White, founder of the Church of Christ Whiteite, former apostle and strong supporter of Joseph Smith. After his death in 1858, most of his followers joined the RLDS Church, reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is now called the Community of Christ. in 1853, Alpheus Cutler, who we looked at previously, who was a member of the Council of 50 in Nauvoo, he left the main body of the church, the Brighamite church, and he left that, and he was excommunicated in 1851. And again, the E is there, but it's a little fragile E, because the last information about that church was in 2010, and there were at that time 12 members, all in independence. I should pause here and say that if anybody who sees this video, if you know of any information about any of these different expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement that we're going to be talking about and looking at here, if you know a bit more information than I'm giving, I'd be most grateful if you would send me an email or drop a comment below and pass on the information that you have. For example, if you had a relative who was in that particular group, it would be very interesting to know that, and any information that you might have about that would be very useful. And particularly if you think I've got it wrong, and instead of a red D, it ought to be a green E, please let me know, and we can make changes to that. Let's go then on to 1847. So what we're doing, we started it in 1830, and we're going year by year and seeing where the branches off, when they happened and how they happened, and who was involved in that. And 1847, and then later again in 1875, we come to the Church of Christ Whitmerite. That's David Whitmer, who, as we said earlier, is one of the three witnesses. In 1847, he was briefly involved in the church, founded actually by former apostle William E. McLellin, although William E. McLellin was basically starting the church in David Whitmer's name. He believed that David Whitmer was the authentic successor to Joseph Smith, and so that's why David Whitmer was involved, although only briefly, because he was reluctant initially to go any further with it. But then later in 1875, Whitmer had kind of changed his views, and he then founded or refounded the Church of Christ Whitmerite. But by 1925, most members had united with the Church of Christ Temple Lot. We'll come on to that a little bit later as well. But again, if anybody has better information and knows, for example, that there is still a Whitmer group, then please, let me know on that. Okay, so those pictures there, you've got the top picture is David Whitmer, and then David Whitmer below a little bit later, and then that's William McLellin at the bottom there. In 1848, James Colin Brewster, he co-founded the Church of Christ, and it was referred to as Brewsterite. In 1830, now see, whenever I use that term, I feel a bit uneasy about it, because I think it's a little bit pejorative, and it comes from people using it who were looking in at that organization from the outside. It is very likely that they did not refer to themselves as Brewsterites, but I don't know that for sure. So in 1836, at the age of 10, James Brewster claimed that he had been visited by the angel Moroni. In November 1837, due to his persistent claims of being a prophet, Brewster was disfellowshipped from the LDS Church. After the death of Joseph Smith in June 1844, Brewster began to accumulate followers in Springfield, Illinois, from Latter-day Saints who were searching for a new prophet leader. So just it is clear from that kind of reference that after Joseph Smith's murder in 1844, there would have been a lot of uncertainty amongst all of the members of the church, and there were probably 10 to 15,000 members of the church in the sort of Nauvoo area at that time, and many people, many families and individuals would have been wondering, well, where do we go? What do we do? Who should we follow? And it would have been a time of huge uncertainty. In 1848, Brewster and Hazen Aldridge founded the Church of Christ, which they claimed was the true successor to the Church of Christ that Smith had founded in 1830. Brewster continued to receive revelation from God on behalf of the church, and in 1850 he declared that there was a land called Bashan in the Rio Grande Valley that God had selected as the new gathering place for the Latter-day Saints. In 1850, Brewster led a wagon train of followers to find Bashan, while Aldridge, who had begun to doubt Brewster's prophetic abilities, remained behind in Kirtland. Disagreements amongst followers resulted in the demise of the church in 1851. A couple of sources there, Gary Vitale of 2007 and Stephen Shields, who we've referenced, 1990. Oh, and an address there to the Church of Christ by James Colin Brewster. I couldn't not find a picture of any kind for James Colin Brewster, so I put in his address, or a picture of his address instead. So now we go to 1860, and this is the beginning of what has really become the second largest, if we are talking about numbers, the second largest expression of the Latter-day Saint movement, originally called the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The formal, now it's called the Community of Christ. The formal reorganization occurred on April the 6th, 1860. Joseph Smith III was 11 when his father was killed, and so now in 1860 he's taking on the role that people had been encouraging him to take on, asking him to take on, probably even pleading with him to take on for some considerable time prior to that. And then, so in 1860, the church was called Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then in 1872, they added the name Reorganized. The church regards itself as the true embodiment of the original church organized in 1830 by Joseph Smith, and it regards Joseph Smith III, the eldest surviving son of Smith, to have been his legitimate successor. Now that is partly the reason why I have included this different kind of arrowed branch off there, because it's a little pejorative for us, or for anybody, particularly for me as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to use that little branch with the E at the top, because it's suggesting that it's a kind of a break off from the original, or from the what we could call the Brighamite movement of the church. And so it's probably fairer, kinder, and more accurate to use a different symbol, which I've tried to do below. And so we've got Joseph Smith starting the church in 1830, and then there is a branch off. It looks like the way I've done it is that the branch off is at the same time. And in a sense it was, because there were so many of the members of the church in 1844 who did not go with, or did not follow Brigham and the main body of the church in 1846-47. They stayed in the Nauvoo area or moved to different areas, but their allegiance was not with with Brigham Young and the Quorum of the 12. Their allegiance was with Joseph Smith III, but he was only 11 years old, or 13 or 14 when the Brigham part of the church left for Utah. So I think that's a little bit better way of positioning it. The church's priesthood was opened to women in 1984, and that actually did cause some more branch-offs, schisms, or different expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement as a consequence by those people who did not feel that it was right that women be ordained to the priesthood. And then in 2001, the name of the church officially became known as Community of Christ, to better articulate their mission to proclaim Jesus Christ and promote communities of joy, hope, love and peace. And on Sunday, June the 1st, 2025, Stacey Cram, I'm not exactly sure how that's pronounced, Stacey Cram was ordained the 9th prophet president and is the first woman to serve in the office. The Community of Christ website says that they have 250,000 members in more than 60 nations. Moving to 1861, we have George J. Adams. He founded Church of the Messiah. A former Methodist preacher, Adams joined the LDS Church in 1840. He was a member of the Council of 50. He was disfellowshipped and excommunicated in 1845. He was a counselor to James Strang in the Strang's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we've already looked at. He was excommunicated from the Strangite movement. Adams and 150 members travelled to and settled in Palestine. The colony ultimately failed. Members returned to the US, and most of them affiliated to the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is now referred to and is called the Community of Christ. Let's stay in 1861 and look at Joseph Morris, an English convert to the LDS Church, founder of the Church of the Firstborn, again brackets Morrisite, at Kingston, or possibly Kington Fort, a 3-acre 12,000 square metre fort on the Weber River that has been abandoned in 1858. By midsummer 1861, the group reached 300 followers. Schismatic sects have been defunct since 1969, excepting the Order of Enoch, which is still ongoing, as far as I understand. Also in 1861, Walter M. Gibson, he founded Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it was located in Hawaii. As far as I'm aware, it is defunct. 1867, William W. Davies founded the Kingdom of Heaven, which was located near Walla Walla, Washington, from 1867 to 1881. Again, as far as I know, it's defunct. 1863, Granville Hedrick, the Church of Christ, informally called Hedrickites, and also called the Church of Christ Temple Lot. This movement is headquartered in Independence, Missouri, on a parcel of land known as the Temple Lot. The nickname for members of the church, Hedrickites, comes from the surname of Granville Hedrick, who was ordained as the church's leader in July 1863. Thought to be about 7,300 members in the church to this present day. it's probably recognizable from the big lawsuit that was running in the 1890s between the Church of Christ Temple lot and the RLDS Church, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who were claiming that the land upon which the Church of Christ Temple lot was located was in fact, they owned it, and they were requiring the Church of Christ Temple lot to vacate it so that they could build on it. They lost the case. I think I'm right here. I think the Church of Christ Temple lot lost the case, but then when they went to appeal, they won the appeal, and so they are still there on the site as we speak today. 1930 is a huge jump ahead, and it's a break off from the Church of Christ Temple lot. It was founded by Otto Fetting. He broke off in 1929, but they also have their world headquarters in Independence, and they are extant, but I was not able to get any idea of the numbers on that one. Now we jump to 1869, and we're now in Utah. William Godbey is the founder of the Church of Zion, also called Godbeyites. Again, I don't think they probably called themselves that. He was a British convert to the church through Parley P. Pratt in Hull, and he was only 16 or maybe 17 at the time in 1850. And he emigrated to the US the same year. He was a seaman even at the young age of 16 or 17, and as soon as he joined the church, he decided he was going to emigrate to the US, and he worked his passage on various ships until he got there, and then he walked much of the way to Salt Lake himself. So he was a very vigorous, enterprising young fellow. And in 1868, Godbey and other Mormon merchants began criticizing the economic demands and policies of Brigham Young in a magazine called Utah Magazine, a periodical that would eventually become the Salt Lake Tribune, hence the Salt Lake Tribune logo at the bottom there. Godbey formed the Godbeyite Liberal Party, Utah's first opposition political organization to the church. He was excommunicated in 1869 for apostasy. He and others started a Mormon faction called the Church of Zion. Yep, we've already done that. Never more than several hundred strong, apparently. By the 1880s, Godbey's church had ceased to exist. As far as I know, if anyone knows different, please message me. Now we jump to another of the very significant episodes that resulted in quite a lot of different expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement occurring. And we start with talking about Lawrence C. Woolley, who was excommunicated from the LDS Church in 1924. He is known as or referred to as the father of Mormon fundamentalism amongst most fundamentalist denominations. He founded the Council of Friends, or Priesthood Council, sometime between 1929 and 1933. Why is the date not more specific? Well, I couldn't find a more specific date. If anybody has one, please let me know. It started probably rather quietly, and grew over the years. So the background and history here, and we bring in John Taylor and his 1886 revelation, which incidentally was recently released for the first time into the Joseph Smith papers by the church. And so you can go onto the Joseph Smith papers and you can see the revelation, although you've probably already seen it because it was already available on the internet, but you can go and see it on Joseph Smith papers, read about the background from the church's perspective. But Lawrence C. Woolley in 1886, so just a little bit of history on it. He was a what was called a bodyguard and a kind of like a security guy for John Taylor, because John Taylor, who was the president of the church at the time, he was the prophet, seer, and revelator for the church, but he was also in hiding because of polygamy, and because in 1886 the United States government had declared that anybody practicing polygamy would be arrested and charged and would serve prison sentence, and many were. John Taylor and other members of the First Presidency and the Council of the 12 Apostles went into hiding, and one of the houses that John Taylor took refuge in was Lawrence C. Woolley's father's house. His name is John W. Woolley. And on a particular September evening in 1886, Lawrence C. Woolley was on duty, sitting on a chair outside the bedroom of John Taylor. That was part of his role, was to protect President Taylor, and to warn him if sheriffs arrived looking for him to arrest him. And Lauren Woolley describes hearing voices in the room, knowing that John Taylor was alone in the room, but hearing different voices in the room, and seeing a light sort of shine underneath the door. The following day, John Taylor gathered the people who were there around him and told them that he had had a conversation with Joseph Smith, and that Jesus Christ had also been in the room, and a revelation had been given, and that he was, because there had been a lot of discussion at the senior levels in the church about what are we going to do about the US government threatening to take away all of the property of the church and to basically destroy the church. And a lot of people have said we've got to do something, and one of the proposals put forward was that we abandon, for the time being anyway, the principle of plural marriage. And John Taylor is allegedly says that he would never do that, and he would rather cut his arm off than change or go against the revelations that Joseph Smith had received to bring in plural marriage. Now, so and also at that time, Lauren Woolley says that John Taylor ordained him, his father, and these other three gentlemen who are shown there. George Q. Cannon. George Q. Cannon, incidentally, was John Taylor's counselor in the First Presidency, or one of them. Samuel Bateman and Charles Wilkin. And that ordination, although it didn't really flower or develop into anything until about 1929, many years later. But that is really the sort of start of what you might refer to as the fundamentalist movement within the Latter-day Saint movement generally, because they believed that it was wrong to bring an end to plural marriage, although they might have accepted it on the political level, but not on the religious level. And so they wanted to continue it, and many of them did continue it, and we can see coming out of the Council of Seven Friends there, we can see in 1939 the start of a number of different break-off movements, churches, different expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement. And you can see here, as with all of the ones we've talked about and will talk about, you can see that once there is a different expression, often then subsequently there are more different expressions or break-offs or splinter groups that break away from the one that they started with themselves. That's why I've kind of shown that. So the pictures on the right at the top is Lauren Woolley. Leroy Johnson is is underneath him, and he was one of the starters, one of the founders of what's called the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in terms of its full title. And from there you get, when Leroy Johnson died, you get Rulon Jeffs, and he's the gentleman underneath him there. Rulon Jeffs is the next leader of that particular group, the FLDS group, and then his son Warren Jeffs is there. Now he's pictured, and I don't know whether somebody's done this deliberately, quite possibly, but the only picture I could find of Warren Jeffs is his FBI 10 Most Wanted fugitive picture, and he is in prison, and he's not eligible for parole until apparently 2038, charged with a number of accounts of rape and indecent assault and so forth. So that is a major period of time, although it takes 2 or 3 decades to unfold. It really does all start in 1886 with this revelation from John Taylor. That's a very significant moment, and it wasn't until something like 1920 or yes, in 1920 Lauren Woolley is remembering these ordinations, but also John Taylor's son, who I think is John W. Taylor, he's going through some of the records after his father has died. He's going through some of the records, and he finds this note that's handwritten by John Taylor, and that sort of becomes the revelation, because John Taylor writes about that, and that's what you can see on the Joseph Smith papers, but you can see it in many other places as well. Okay, we're going to move forward at this point, and we come to 1936. This is called the Third Convention. It refers to a schismatic group of Mexican Latter-day Saints in central Mexico who disagreed with decisions made by church leadership in Salt Lake regarding issues related to church administration and race. They separated from the main body of the church between 1936 and 1946. For most of the Third Convention reconciled with and rejoined the church, the main church in 1946. Margarita Bautista abstained. In 1947, Batista founded a colonia called Colonia Industrial de la Nueva Jerazulan. Bad pronunciation. His own Mormon denomination, in which he reintroduced the United Order and plural marriage. Batista died in 1961, but his church and colony survive to the present day. As recently as 2011, 800 people still live in Colonia Industrial, hold property in common through a community trust, and practice plural marriage, continuing Batista's teachings. Apparently they were very upset with the way the church was, because the church was centralized in Salt Lake City. They were upset that they weren't getting the kind of language support, they weren't getting the literature in the kind of language that they wanted. They weren't having any say in who was called as the mission president, who presided over the whole country, and it was always somebody from Salt Lake, and they just didn't feel that they were being listened to or heard at the senior level in the church. That's why they decided to separate from the main body, and for 10 years they were a separate sort of autonomous organization. Jumping to 1943, Maurice Glendenning, founder of the House of Aaron, less commonly known as the Aaronic Order or the Order of Aaron. The sect is centered in Eskdale, Utah, a small farming, I shouldn't call it a sect, this particular Latter-day Saint expression is centered in Eskdale, Utah, a small farming community in Millard County, with additional branches in Partoon and Murray, Utah, has an estimated membership between 1,500 and 2,000. If anybody has any more information on that, please let me know. In 1955, William C. Conway established a church which he called the Perfected Church of Jesus Christ of Immaculate Latter-day Saints, which he sometimes referred to as the Restored Apostolic Church of Jesus Christ of Immaculate Latter-day Saints. I don't know very much more about that, other than that he died at the age of 104, and as far as I know, that is a defunct organization. In 1966, David Edward Desmond organized the United Order Family of Christ, a schismatic sect, another one, which was founded in 1966, in Denver, Colorado. That existed until at least 1973 or 1974. And the United Order Family of Christ was for young gay men only, ages 18 to 30. In 1982, Robert C. Crossfield organized what has been referred to as the School of Prophets, and it was headquartered in Salem, Utah. In 1968, he published the Book of Onias, which contained revelations he claimed to have received since 1961. These revelations chastised LDS church leaders for their abandonment of the celestial laws. Crossfield was excommunicated in 1972, and as we said, in 1982 he formally established the School of the Prophets. Ron and Dan Lafferty, their claim to fame, or claim to horrendous notoriety, is captured in the book Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer, which was made into a television series last year, I think, called Under the Banner of Heaven. And it covers the story of these two Lafferty brothers who, after having been excommunicated from the LDS church, drifted to one or two other other organizations and then ended up in the School of the Prophets. They were removed from the School of the Prophets, but 4 months after being removed, and they were removed for refusing to renounce their revelation calling for the killing of certain individuals. These Lafferty brothers murdered their brother Alan's wife and infant daughter. In 1983, Art Buller organized Church of Christ. He was born in 1948. He joined the LDS Church in the 1970s. He was excommunicated mid-70s. Around 1983, he began preaching that he was the so-called one mighty and strong. Yes, one mighty and strong. I think that comes from section 85 of the Doctrine and Covenants, and a lot of people have sort of got onto that particular bandwagon, if you know what I mean, and have claimed to be the one mighty and strong that was referred to in the Joseph Smith revelation. The Church History Matters duo, Scott Woodward and Casey Griffiths, talk about how it appears to them that the reference to the one mighty and strong is particular and peculiar to that particular revelation, and not something that was suggested by Joseph Smith, that there was going to be somebody coming along later. But a lot of people have claimed that title, and Art Buller is one of them. Art Buller featured in the 1993 documentary movie The God Makers 2. Although a by-the-book fundamentalist, Art Buller is a desert-dwelling loner with no wives, and his Church of Christ has few, if any, genuine disciples. He passed away in July of 2023. As far as I know, his movement is no longer with us either. In 1985, Antonio A. Feliz organized Restoration Church of Jesus Christ, RCJC, based in Salt Lake City, Utah, a church that catered primarily to LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. It was founded, yeah, we've said that. A former LDS bishop, he had been excommunicated for homosexual acts. It was originally called the Church of Jesus Christ of All Latter-day Saints. However, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints complained that the name was too similar, and it was changed to RCJC. Women were ordained to all levels of the priesthood because women have historically held priesthood and they provide valuable insights for all of humanity. It was dissolved 25 years later in 2010 after the Community of Christ's 2010 decision to discontinue rebaptism threw the RCJC congregations into contentious turmoil. They were not able to reach agreement. I could not find a picture of Antonio A. Feliz, but I show you a picture of his book as the next best thing. In 1985, Kenneth Asay, Church of Jesus Christ in Zion, established it. It appears Ken eventually started to claim he was Joseph Smith reincarnated. Asay died in 1985 with his wife in a plane crash, after which the church was taken over by Roger Billings. Billings incorporated the church in Missouri in 1989. Church practices included plural marriage and community living. As of 2004, the church was based in Independence, Missouri. It is now thought to be defunct. Again, if anybody knows better and differently, please let me know. In 1994, James D. Harmston organized True and Living Church of Jesus Christ of Saints of the Last Days, headquartered in Manti, Utah, whereas of 2004 it maintained a membership of 300 to 500 adherents. I couldn't find any more information about whether that is still the case. The TLC, as it is often referred to, I'm not just making that up, the TLC began as a study group and priesthood council in the early 1990s, where people from both the LDS Church and Mormon fundamentalist churches met together to discuss doctrine. The TLC practices polygamy. I don't know whether it still does. If anybody has any information, please let me know. In 1995, Michael Bethel, founding apostle of the Pentecostal Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, set up in Cana, Louisiana. So with 30 others, formed an independent study group. That's what it started out as, called LDS Scripture Readers. And then in March of 1995, they started up the Pentecostal Church. The Lord worked within the LDS Scripture Readers 3 months after the name of the group changed to the Pentecostal Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 2004, Church of the Firstborn in the General Assembly of Heaven was set up by Terrell Dalton. On March 22nd, 2012, Terrell Dalton, 45 years old, who used the name the Holy Ghost, was convicted of 2 counts of rape, a first-degree felony. The Church of the Firstborn and the General Assembly of Heaven was based in Magna, Salt Lake County, at the time of the alleged rape, September of 2005, but later moved to Idaho and Montana. As far as I know, that movement is not extant, it's defunct. In 2006, the Restored Branch of Jesus Christ was organized by Matthew P. Gill. Matthew Gill is based in Derbyshire, England. That's why he gets a whole screen to himself. No. The inspired version of the Bible, the Restored Covenant edition of the Book of Mormon, the Chronicles of the Children of Aronek, and the Restored Branch edition of the Doctrine and Covenants, they are all part of the scriptures that the Restored Branch of Jesus Christ follow and use. Matthew has about 102 videos on his YouTube channel, which started in April 2011. Gill says, quote, "When I was in the LDS Church, I had a spiritual experience when I was about 12 in 1990, where I saw an angel. I saw Moroni and the gold plates. Then about October 2005, I had another angelic encounter. That's when I started to part ways with the LDS Church. We don't believe in polygamy. We certainly don't believe Joseph was a polygamist." End of quote. The church, as I say, started in 2006. It started as the Latter-day Church of Jesus Christ. Then the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sued, and they had to change their name. Hence, the name now is the Restored Branch of Jesus Christ. And it looks from all of the website and internet activity that that's an extant and flourishing branch. In 2017, Denver Snuffer Jr. Started the Remnant Movement Fellowships. Just to be clear, not to be confused with Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is a church movement that broke away in April 2000 from the RLDS Church, which became the Community of Christ in 2001. The Remnant Movement Fellowships are a loosely organized branch of the Latter-day Saint movement, formed by individuals who accept alleged divine revelations received by Denver Snuffer Jr., an attorney excommunicated from the LDS Church in 2013. As of 2017, the movement has 500 to 1,000 adherents worldwide. Now that might be more. If anybody has better information on that, be interested to hear it. As of 2024, at least 50 fellowships are affiliated with the movement throughout the USA, UK, Europe, Africa and Japan. The movement de-emphasizes hierarchy and organization, with some fellowships asserting they possess no leadership. At the October 2024 conference, adherents voted to accept a modern English version of the Book of Mormon titled The Covenant of Christ as scripture. The movement rejects any doctrinal innovations by Brigham Young. Most in the movement agree with the Community of Christ's formerly maintained belief that Joseph Smith did not practice plural marriage, believing instead it to be a Young innovation. Just on that point, the Community of Christ's situation has shifted somewhat on that subject. I think I'm right in saying that most members of the Community of Christ do believe that Smith did practice plural marriage, although there may be members within who don't, and there may be people who have left because they don't. But anyway, any more information on that would be helpful. So I'm just going to finish off here with a slide taken again from John Hamer's presentation, which is kind of the constellation of Mormonism, and it shows on the left in the yellow the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, rather like you see different pictures of planets showing their different size. You see a lot of those on in social media channels, and I think John here is kind of suggesting that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is in comparison with the size of other organizations is significantly larger, and he's used different size circles to kind of suggest that. And as you can see, there are lots and lots of much smaller circles of those different colors. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's Stephen Shields who catalogues in his encyclopedia some 600 or more different movements, different expressions of the Latter-day Saint movement. That includes the big ones like the Community of Christ, like the LDS Church, and some of the others like the AUB, the Temple Lot, the Remnant movement, Rigdonites, etc. But it also includes some, as we've seen as we've gone through some of these, some very, very small ones. So my objective has not been to cover all 600 of them, but to just look at some of them and to look at the timeline that they emerged. I hope it's been of some interest. Please leave your comments and your thoughts. Please subscribe to the channel if you like it, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.